The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik. I will be your host for today's Nonprofit MBA podcast. And for those of you who don't know me, I am co-founder of Financing Solutions, and we are the leading provider in the United States for lines of credit for small nonprofits. And yes, there's a company that specifically focuses in on that. It's a great product. It's really loved. We've been doing it for 13 years now, and it's really it's something that nonprofits have wanted for a long time. If you're interested in learning more about the line of credit for your nonprofit, please visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Again, that's nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And we have a sponsor, as we have had for quite some time. Array's Fast Fund Online is accounting software that's specifically made for small to medium-sized nonprofit. It has everything built right in there. It's so much better than QuickBooks. It has accounting, it has fundraising modules, it has payroll. It's all in one single solution. And if you're interested in learning more about it, and it's not expensive either. So if you're interested in learning more, go to raize.com, ARAIZE.com, or call 866-840-7449. Today, I am very excited to be speaking with Mike Gellman from High Five Career Coaching. For over 20 years, Mike, who has been the founder and CEO of High Five Career Coaching, has successfully facilitated numerous talent management and organizational development initiatives, including succession planning, high potential leadership development or leader development, employee engagement, team building, and culture change. He also is a certified coach and author of the book Pipe Dreams, 7 Pipe Dreams of Career Success. He launched his nonprofit career in organizational development at the world famous San Diego Zoo. Mike, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me here.
So we're going to be talking about something, that every nonprofit seems to have has an issue with, and that is how to build and keep your talent. So do you hear often, as far as nonprofits go, the issue in regards to keeping their talent?
Yeah, certainly it's a big challenge now. COVID brought things to the forefront in that regard, whereas many people are drawn to nonprofits because of the mission, right, the cause, and they believe in that. But many burned out, right, during not just during COVID, but that accentuated it. And now that we're out of it, there's a lot of concerns, particularly in Southern California, where I am, and other parts of the country, around getting a living wage, having more equity with respect to the compensation, in addition to just working for a great organization, with a great mission. So.
Yeah, I mean, how much have you found from your experience is turnover a function of management or of, if a lot of people are leaving an organization, and let's say, it used to be the acceptable level of turnover was 5%. So if every year, if your staff was leaving and you were under 5%, then you're doing well. Is that still the case? Is that number still valid?
Yeah, it's much higher these days, and it's depending on industry. But in the nonprofit sector, don't quote me on it, but it's closer to 20-30%.
Holy cow!
It's really high, and so. But to your point, most people still leave because of their manager, their boss. I think you're alluding to that.
What I was alluding. Right. I was alluding to the idea that especially what I've seen in nonprofit sectors is that people say, well, they're leaving because they're not making enough money. And in the for-profit sector, that was always an excuse that someone would say, oh, they're leaving because they want more money. And that's not a good excuse, because takes somebody a lot of thought to really leave an organization, and it usually comes down to how they've been treated, not
Mhm.
the money that they've made. And so, when I'm running my companies, I look at, okay, is our turnover under 5%? And if it is, then I think that we're doing a good job of managing the people that we have. If it's over 5%, then I say, you know what, we're doing something completely wrong. So that's why I kind of talk about it. And I think on this podcast is something that our listeners need to know that. So, I can't, 20% is ridiculous. That I don't know how you could sustain an organization with that type of turnover. What do you think?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's evenly distributed. I mean, it just the challenge is some of the smaller nonprofits don't have the reserves, to sustain themselves during
Yeah.
difficult times, and the larger nonprofits, um, have a little bit more, and their funding cycles are different, right? So, you know, some of the smaller nonprofits are more dependent maybe on a single donor or grant funder.
Yeah.
And, those that are more mature nonprofits or larger might have ideally more multiple income streams, right? And some of it might be paid for service, some of it might be from foundations, individual donors, donor advised funds, things like that. And so they have a little more resilience, uh, available fundraising events that they may have, things like that.
I mean,
So,
keep in mind that if you have 4 employees and one of them leaves, that's
well, that too,
25% turnover,
that can
right?
skew the percentage, right? And
Yeah.
so, most I mean, many nonprofits might just have one or two or three people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So it
yes,
skews
that
it.
can skew the
Yeah.
percentages a little bit. Yeah.
I think anytime someone leaves, you really sit there and you say, what was the main cause here? And then then you kind of do a debrief, and then you kind of fix it if it's if you think it's a real issue. So having said that, today's whole topic is about keeping your talent, building your talent. What have you seen when it comes to nonprofits? Some of the key ingredients of keeping your talent.
Yeah. Well, certainly a greater emphasis on having a career path of some sort, particularly with the Gen Z and the millennials. They want to know that there's some type of growth and development path. And so, to the extent, and this doesn't just apply to nonprofits, I mean, really, it's in any industry, is there's a greater desire for having purpose and working for an organization that aligns with their values. So the nonprofits have that going for them, that they tend to be more, right, purpose driven, mission focused. So that's the positive. But to keep them engaged, it's checking in with them and seeing how can we create opportunities to keep them developing new skills and have new opportunities. And in all honesty, it's really mixed because many nonprofits, um, they're stretched thin, and so the executive director or CEO isn't always spending the time needed to figure that out, right? 'Cause they're stretched thin, and so that is a challenge. So to the extent to which they can regroup and really kind of think about and just have conversations at the very least with their people, like what's important to them, that might open up some possibilities. Even if they can't pay them market rate, if employees feel like they're growing and building skills and valued in that way, then that's another way to keep them
Hmm.
longer, and not just keep them, but performing at a high level, right? Because you don't want to just keep people that are physically there, but mentally checked out or disengaged.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the thoughts I think I certainly have is it. I remember this one time when I had this one employee. This is early on in my career where you know she was really good, and I promoted her into a position because I wanted to keep her that she wasn't really qualified for. She wasn't
Uh,
really good at. So I think you want to be careful at that as well. And
yeah.
then other times is that when someone gets a title,
Hmm.
they also, uh, become much more valuable to other people too, as well.
Hmm.
So, you got to be careful with those type of things. I know one of the things I did with one of the companies, just as an idea, which was a good one, it worked out well for me, was I didn't have enough money to have an operations manager and for one of the companies that I had. And so I took one of my employees who I thought would be really good at that role but I kept her in her existing role, but I gave her an extra $10,000 to be the operations manager too. And she loved it. She was young, and by you know changing her title to operations coach, um, it um, it was like she had two titles, which titles really aren't even that important anymore. But it she knew she was really happy with that additional responsibilities. And you're right, she grew her skill set too, and it worked out really well. She was with me for 11 years. So,
Great.
so when you are seeing lots of turnovers, have you had a client who has talked to you about, hey, we're seeing a lot of turnover. What do what do you usually do about it, Mike?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they are bringing me in to help them figure that out, um, oftentimes it's kind of doing a diagnostic of some sort, right? And really getting to the root cause. So usually it entails maybe some one-on-one conversations with employees, um, or a survey of some sort where we can protect their um, identity, so confidential, and really kind of identify what are the main themes. What's really, is there a pattern that we can detect, or is it just a one-off thing, right? So, the one-off things you can address on their own, but if there's a pattern over time where turnover is an issue, or I don't know, just even attracting talent is an issue, then we can usually find out what's happening. And so, is it something that the leader's doing or not doing? Is it that employees don't have the resources they need? Maybe they have laptops that are 10 years old or something like that, or technology. Maybe they have a new donor management system that was purchased, but they weren't adequately trained on that. And so they're just getting frustrated uh, with that, depending on their tech savvy, and depending on the functionality of the system. Sometimes it's certain policies. A big thing now is the return to office movement after the work from home movement, and a good chunk of my business is career coaching for individuals, and I got to tell you, many of them really do not want to go back into the office if they don't have to. I mean, it's really shifted now that they got a taste of working from home. And so having a sensible policy, in the eyes of employees is something that, to look at. So basically just assessing, doing the diagnostic of what are the things that are really contributing to someone's disengagement and wanting to leave. It could be in any number of factors. It could be the nature of the work itself, the way the job is designed. Sometimes people are dealing with a lot of heavy, particularly in nonprofits, they're solving societal issues oftentimes, and it can be heavy. Right? And so if you're dealing with, like, for example, a homeless population, you may love it, it might be rewarding, but at some point, if there's not any relief, uh, it can be tough. So, some organizations now, nonprofits, are starting to explore sabbaticals, right? And things of that nature for longer term employees. This is a way to give them an opportunity to recharge, including the CEOs.
Let me ask you a question. With the younger generations, kids in their 20s, have you found that the idealism that they come in with, um, when they start to reach 30, let's say, that they start to realize that money is much more important to them than the causes that they were caring about?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not so sure that it's, in my view anyway, a generational thing. I think naturally, as someone gets into their 30s, maybe at that point in time, they're married, maybe they're having kids, things of that nature. Want to buy a house, so there's some practical things that happen, right? Just as you get older in general, where money, can be more important, and stability may be more important. And so, I see that evolution because I see it with people who are mid-career and they feel stuck. So that's the opposite problem. There's people that are disengaged, they want to do something different, but they stay because they feel it's too much of a risk to move to another organization or start a new career, because maybe at this point they're getting a decent salary, or because they have the health insurance. That's a big one that keeps people where they're at, and they don't want to risk losing it and going into the unknown, and so that oftentimes will keep people in their 30s, 40s, 50s in a job that they don't enjoy anymore, you know.
When nonprofits have brought you in to help, what has the engagement typically? What has it usually been about?
Yeah. Well, it really varies, Steve. So, I mean, one example, I have a nonprofit that's bringing me in. We just started to do some succession planning, and it's a smaller nonprofit. It's about 15 employees, but a long-term CEO, and they're not going to be around forever. And the question is, what's going to happen once they retire? And so, are there people prepared for that? And so that's one engagement. I have another nonprofit that had some conflict within the team, between employee and supervisors, and between the executive director and her directors. And so, she brought me in to do some coaching for her, so executive coaching, one-on-one, but then also, later on, to work with the team overall in terms of their uh, group dynamics and the conflicts that occur, as well as some mediation. So, um, other nonprofits have been brought in to facilitate strategic planning for the organization. I had one that was, not too long ago, a startup, a nonprofit that really needed that roadmap. And so, we kind of set aside a couple of days to do some strategic planning, and create that roadmap. So, those are some examples.
When it came to succession planning, which is another form of managing talent, right? Uh, Typically, what are some of the things that you're working with, either the board on? Are you working with the board on it, or are you working with the CEO? The
Yeah,
executive
usually it's
director,
both. Yeah,
both of them,
usually.
right? And so, what are usually the things that you have to kind of really keep them focused on?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's education is a part of it. Because most nonprofits, in my experience, don't really do succession planning, and to their detriment, right? I mean, a lot of times they end up paying maybe uh, a recruiter when once someone leaves, and that costs a lot. And then there's a disruption as well in the business, and then there's other levels too, and usually. So a lot of times it's educating them around building that pipeline of talent, and it takes some foresight, right? So if you want some fruit, if you're planting a garden and you have fruit, to get the oranges and apples and pears and all that, if you plant those trees tomorrow, you can't expect that you're going to get the fruit for a while. It's going to take you a few years. So in kind of cultivating that talent and being mindful of that. It's kind of like in your world with um, the financial world with budgeting. Like most organizations would never ever go through a period of time where they don't create a budget for the year and they don't track that budget on a monthly or quarterly basis, right? I mean, that's just commonly accepted practice.
Well, for a nonprofit, it is, but yes, okay, yeah,
Right. And so, but the counter of that is, and so there's the counter of that is, well, it's the employees that that carry out the mission and the plan. And so why would you ignore that? That's another form of capital, right? Your human capital. And so the education process is putting talent management on par with, your financial management. They go hand in hand, in order to accomplish a mission. So education's one piece of it. The other is helping them to make certain decisions about the succession planning process. Like, what levels are we doing? Are we doing the CEO? Are we doing the top leadership team? Are we doing certain key positions? That, like, if somebody left, and they might not manage people, but if someone left in a key position, we'd be in a world of hurt. Like, maybe they have a body of knowledge that others don't have in the organization, and that knowledge would just walk out the door. And so sometimes we want a succession plan for those types of roles, and how are we going to develop people to take that over. So part of it's helping them determine kind of who are we succession planning for, um, and helping them identify what are the success factors for someone to be in that role, right? And having those conversations, and then helping them brainstorm individuals in the organization that might potentially be able to fulfill that role. So doing what we call talent reviews. So basically evaluating, each of the employees, what are their strengths, what are their development needs, what are their career aspirations. A lot of times organizations forget to check that with the employees. And they're doing all this planning, but they're not taking the employees' wants and needs and aspirations into account.
yeah.
And so that's part of the process too.
That not in regards to succession planning, but in the for-profit world, because I know you work with both nonprofits and for-profits. What do you think the for-profit world does a better job in regards to talent acquisition than the nonprofit world does, or do they?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah. Um, the for-profit world, from what I've seen, they seem to do a lot more market reference research, like what's going on outside, so that they can be competitive to get talent. So that's one thing I've noticed. There's a little bit more um, involved in that way. But there's also oftentimes more resources available in the for-profit. So they can provide oftentimes more training. They can often have internal people that's what they do. They're trainers and whatnot, and they develop people. Many nonprofits don't have that capacity. And so, and the challenge for them is most funders don't provide general operating support, grants for general operating support. It's starting to change with some trust-based philanthropy, and which is a positive development, but it's still just a small fraction. So in the for-profit world, they have more of the resources available to fund these types of initiatives, and so that's certainly a difference there. Um, but in the nonprofits, it's I think in general they tend to do a better job in many ways engaging their people, and they have the common mission, the common cause that we're here for, and that's more obvious to employees, and oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes less obvious in the for-profit sector, particularly the larger the organization gets.
Yeah, I've this is like my 300th podcast on the Nonprofit Me podcast. So, there have been a number of podcasts that really emphasize how much nonprofits need to really address getting money in that can be used for operational purposes. And I think that's an important part of talent acquisition, keeping your talent is you need to, and the problem is that a lot of executive directors appear to be afraid to ask a donor to contribute to the operational side of the organization. They think that the donors want the money to go toward all the cause. And and I think part of the ability for you to keep your talent is to have a strategy to get money in for operations. And I would tell you, for somebody like me who donates to nonprofits a lot, and I'm on a board, and I'm like, if you come to me and you say, you know, I need this money that you're donating to go so I can pay my staff, so that I can keep talented people, so that I can do these services, or implement what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a business person. I completely get it, and so are so many of your other donors as well. Now I get that some grants are restricted, and that's one thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It might be worth a conversation with them to say, hey, can we up this from 15% to 25% of
Yeah.
unrestricted funds? Because this is the reason why. I mean, why not ask? At least they'll know in the future why it's such a big deal. And you're building this bridge of open communication between the grantors and the grants, the foundations, and stuff like that. Some of it, I think it is challenging. Don't get me wrong. I mean, maybe the person who started the foundation is still alive, and they they'll listen. So, um, but that's one of the other things. That's again, going back to the ideas. I think people stay at organizations because they're well run. They believe in the culture. They believe in the what you're trying to accomplish, regardless if it's profit or for profit. And then the fourth part of that is, well, also working conditions, hours, um, tools, and yes, pay. But it's not just pay and then everything else. It's all bundled in there. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, well, there's a few things you mentioned. I mean, to that point, I think, yeah, there's more than just pay for sure, right? And there's things that employees value that are don't involve money per se, right? It could be education. It could be some other benefits or perks, right? It could be time off, right? There's all kinds of creative ways, and sometimes I'm having conversations with nonprofits around how they can be creative. I have conversations with job seekers as well. Like I said, if you can't get the salary you want, what else would be worth money to you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's getting reimbursed for commuting. Maybe if they're able to take a train to work, just getting a commuter pass, or maybe it's um, an extra week or two of vacation, or maybe it's a flexible schedule. Like what's worth money to you? Being able to
Yeah.
go back to school, because some things hit the bottom line differently than other things, right? Salary is one, but if they're reimbursing you for getting a bachelor's degree or master's degree, an organization might be able to do that versus just paying you outright in salary because it hits the bottom line differently. And
Yeah.
so it's really kind of thinking around that. But in terms of what you brought up earlier, why don't nonprofits just have conversations with funders or ask donors for general operating support? I would agree that yes, initiate the conversation. And I would also say that historically they've been conditioned, I think, not to, because
Yeah.
most funders generally, and individuals or larger funders, that they want it to go to a specific program, or they want to know what's the ROI on this specific investment. And so in a way, they've been conditioned in many cases, just like, why bother, right? But I have seen kind of a shift in the last couple of years, which is encouraging on both sides, right? I see, at least locally, many more nonprofits raising the issue and kind of advocating for themselves and their employees. Like, I need to pay my employees a living wage. So there's a lot more of that happening now.
Yeah.
They're much more vocal, so that's a positive. And funders are also starting to say, maybe we need to reevaluate our giving policies, right, and not be so restrictive. Uh, and so, yeah, more of that, right?
No, I mean, I think it's been making its circuit around the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Even pre-COVID, about the idea of restricted versus unrestricted funds, and
yeah,
educating and stuff like that. So I think that's really kind of what's going
yeah.
on. I think I don't know if the funders know so much. It's the executive directors educating the funders about the value to
That's
them.
part of being able to package it
Yeah.
and sell them on, hey, it's great if you maybe funded this program, but we need this employee to skill up to be able to run it effectively. And that's something I've been pushing locally, is to try to get funders to pair their financial giving with giving um, talent as well. If they don't have it, to bring in some consultant or someone else to offer that capacity building expertise, that technical expertise to assist the nonprofit, and that'll help their dollars go that much further. Because you're kind of building that long-term capacity. Then the money is going to disappear, right, in the course of the year. But if you build the capacity of the employees along the way, then they will be able to they'll be able to sustain that effort over time.
Yep. Agreed. Well, it's a good podcast. That's unfortunately all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank so very much Mike Gellman from High Five Career Coaching for coming on today's podcast. And if you like today's podcasts or any of the other ones, please feel free to share it with a friend and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And if you like today's podcast, please give us a review on your podcasting app and help us get the word out, as long as it's 5 stars. And of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your nonprofit, you can visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Mike, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, probably the best way would be LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Just pull me up there, or mikegellman.com, my website, mikegellman.com.
Great. Thanks for coming on today.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve.
So I'd like to thank our listeners, not just because you're listening to today's podcast, but I'd like to thank you for making the world a better place. It's a full-time job. There's a lot of issues going on out there, and you guys are out there every day on the front line. And I thank you for that. I know Mike thanks you for that too. I just want to remind you this, that you are no good to your employees. You're no good to your family. You're no good to your friends if you don't really take good care of yourself first. Because I know that you care a lot about your cause, but if you don't take good care about yourself, it's going to really rub off on so many different parts of your life. So, unfortunately, saving the world is a marathon and not a sprint. And so you need to have that energy to be able to do that. So please consider that every day when you wake up or the night before, saying, what do I need to do tomorrow so that I can be at my best and take good care of myself? Other than that, I want to thank you for listening to the Nonprofit MBA podcast and continue to listen. We have so many great guests like Mike on. See you later.